I think we need huge systemic change. Group interactions can be especially difficult because it involves that attention splitting into multiple streams.
And it's almost like icy cold water getting thrown over his head.
It's just exhausting. I mean, it's no wonder that so many young people are struggling.
Hi everyone, and welcome to This is Autism, the podcast from the North East Autism Society. My name is Kerry Highcock and I'm the Family Development Manager here at the charity. Today I'm joined by Helen Edgars, an autistic teacher, writer and the voice behind the blog Autistic Realms. Helen brings a wealth of lived experience and professional insight to her work, and she's become a leading voice in helping others understand autism through the lens of monotropism. In this episode, we will be exploring what monotropism is, how it can shape the way autistic people experience the world. We'll talk about what monotropism looks like in daily life, the benefits of embracing a monotropic mindset, and how it compares to polytropic thinking. Helen will also share her work on the Monotropic questionnaire and offer practical ideas for supporting monotropic thinkers in everyday environments. So thank you so much, Helen, for joining us. It's really lovely to meet you because I've followed your work for several years. So it's lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me. I'm very much looking forward to having a chat with you about my favourite subject, which is monotropism.
I mean, I'm quite excited about learning more about monotropism. So I've been looking forward to this podcast. So I guess just to start, really, what is monotropism? Could you describe it for our listeners?
Yeah, so the theory of and the concept of monotropism was first proposed by Dr. Dinah Murray, Dr. Wen Lawson and Mike Lesser back in the 1990s. And that evolved into their 2005 paper, Attention, Monotropism and the Diagnostic Criteria for Autism. And it's basically changed my whole life since I discovered this theory of an affirming theory of autism. And the work challenges the deficit-based models of autism. It highlights that being monotropic and being autistic isn't a flaw, it's just a different mode of attentional resourcing. And that can be a really powerful and effective reframing when you've got positive support. So monotropism is a cognitive style. As I said, it was primarily associated to help reframe autism. Although more recently, through the Monotropism questionnaire, they found, the researchers, Garrow et al., found that the highest cohort with the highest scores in the Monotropism questionnaire are actually those that were autistic and ADHD, so all ADHDers. So monotropism has been increasingly used to help explain autistic and ADHD experiences, really, and ADHD experiences. And it describes a tendency to focus attention very deeply on a limited number of interests, tasks, or sensory experiences at any one time. And this is in contrast to non-autistic people who may be polytropic processors. And if you're a polytropic processor, your attention is more likely to be distributed across multiple tasks or inputs, but more broadly. So monotropism is kind of narrower, but very deep, and polytropism kind of is dispersed, attention is dispersed a lot wider. So it does take a little bit of thinking to get your head around all of that. But to illustrate these key differences, I really like the analogy from Fergus Murray, who's the son of Dinah Murray, one of the original researchers, and who also has the website monotropism.org, which I support. And they liken monotropism to being like a garden hose, whereas polytropism is more like a sprinkler system. So polytropic people have a narrower, maybe a higher pressured stream of attention, which will go deeper into one or just a few areas at any one time. So we can create great depth, immersive experiences, whereas polytropic people, non-monotropic people, their attention is more like a garden sprinkler system. So attention is going to be dispersed across more areas, covering more ground at any one time. And this leads to significant differences in the way autistic and non-autistic people, or polytropic versus monotropic people, manage their life and juggle all the demands that life brings on us, switching context, transitions, sensory experiences. So it's helped explain my whole life, my whole way of being. I can kind of reframe everything through the lens of monotropism, pretty much.
That must be really, really powerful, Helen, to kind of have that language and start to understand about yourself through the lens of monotropism.
Yeah, it kind of redefined everything. When we're talking about autism, is normally through that deficit lens of having maybe obsessive or restricted or very narrow interests, when in fact through the lens of monotropism you can see how it can actually bring a great deal of joy and regulation and clarity for thinking and sensory experiences, and it helps reframe the difficulties that people have with transitions, which can sometimes be disorientating or distressing, because it's more about how your attentional resources are being pulled out and trying to like transition across into a different attention tunnel. But it's not, I don't think monotropism is just about that's kind of sustained attention. It's also about how we relate to things that hold our attention. It's almost like a kind of magnetic pull that draws you towards something, kind of like a gravitational force, really intensely. And that interest kind of chooses you. I think there's a few misconceptions around monotropism where people think it's just about maybe autistic special interests or autistic passions. But it's a lot wider and broader than that. It can be anything that kind of captures your attention at any one time. So at the moment, I'm sitting in my kind of forest den here, and I've got those little sun catchers on my window, so I can see the light kind of shining and reflecting. So it's anything like that which kind of go, oh, that's pulling you in. So I'm having to kind of refocus myself to maintain my attention on the podcast here.
And is it for you, Helen? I mean, I love things like that, anything sparkly or shiny or pretty. Does it tend to be, when you're talking about that attention draw from objects like sensory experiences, does it tend to be a specific type of sensory experience for you that would pull you in?
For me, specifically things around light, perhaps certain sounds that I'm perhaps drawn towards more than other things. As to bring kind of those glimmers of autistic joy, those kind of joyful moments, but also to help you regulate when you are feeling dysregulated. It's thinking about what you need in those other moments, such as, I don't know, like blocking out those shiny lights and having kind of darker environments and maybe weighted blankets, and to help refocus your attentional resources onto something else to help balance you.
What might monotropism or a monotropic thinker, what might that look like in daily life? Like if we were, I work a lot with families, and if I was trying to explain what that might look like for the child perhaps, or the young person, what might they see?
Yeah, so I think it shows up in lots of different ways. I mean, just, there's the saying, isn't it, like, once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So everybody's very unique. I think the difference is just how absorbed and how intense that kind of attentional pull can be at times. So you might spend hours researching depending on what's kind of pulling your interest at the time, researching topics, for example, monotropism and autism for myself, building, writing, creating things, depending on what your interest is, to get into that kind of flow state. And on the flip side of that, when your attention is pulled into something more negative, maybe, you can obviously get into those cycles of looping, kind of ruminating thoughts, which may not be as positive as your deep interest and your passions. And that deep interest where your attention's being pulled to such an extent, I think it, for me personally, and for lots of young people that I've worked with as well in the past as a teacher, it really helps explain the difficulties that people can have with their interoception system when your attention is, all of your attentional resources are pretty much being consumed by engaging in either a topic of interest or a sensory experience. It leaves very few resources then to be able to kind of tune in to the rest of your body. So it leaves people maybe forgetting to eat, or not noticing when they're hungry, noticing when they need the toilet, or when they're in pain, when they might need to rest. You can be, when you're deeply absorbed in that kind of flow state, time seems to kind of slip away almost. Certainly for me, like 10 minutes in reality, when I'm really absorbed in something, I can be absorbed in it for several hours, but it only feels like 10 minutes to myself. But yeah, I think the biggest challenges for monotropic people are probably things like transitions, task switching, going from one activity to another can be mentally and kind of sensorily and emotionally destabilizing. And being interrupted when you're being pulled out of those attention tunnels, it takes a lot of energy to kind of pull yourself out of one tunnel and try and get into another tunnel. You can get into that kind of state of inertia where you're unable to start or stop anything.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you because you were in the zone there. But when you were talking, Helen, it reminds me a lot about we do a lot of work with schools. So I'm thinking, and you'll know this as a teacher, I don't think young people have enough time to be in the monotropic space because everything's so, we do this, we do that, we do this, there isn't much time to go deep, is there, into interests? And
I think having interest-led learning is really, really powerful, and having flexible timetables. So in a classroom, I think there's lots of things that we can do to help support monotropic people a lot better. There's lots of kind of deficit negative framing of autistic students maybe being off task, maybe thinking that they're not engaged enough or they're not working in the right way. And when you frame it through monotropism and flow states, you can understand how important it is to have those more flexible timetables, to give students more space between different activities, because schools are such busy places. You've got multiple lessons, multiple teachers, multiple rooms throughout the day where people have to literally going from one attention tunnel into another, and it's that constant pulling and having to realign all of your energy and resources for every single kind of transition that happens, and that can be just exhausting on top of the need that so many people have to mask to try and fit in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that monotropism is kind of an autistic-led theory. So we know that many, many autistic people experience monotropism, and it's only recently, I guess, that the research is kind of catching up with the kind of the lived experience. Really, is that accurate, Helen, or not?
So, yeah, the research into monotropism is absolutely increasing. It's super duper duper exciting. There's loads more researchers, especially working kind of neurodiversity-affirming fields, that are recognising that monotropism isn't just kind of an autistic quirk or anything like that. It's a central part of how many autistic and ADHD individuals experience the world. And as I said, it affects our attention, our energy, how we socialise, how we learn, how we communicate, how you regulate, how you structure your day. It affects every single moment of your sleeping and waking life and being monotropic. And I think one of the landmark papers most recently is by Gower et al. In 2023, who developed the Monotropism questionnaire. And they investigated it was a huge study, they investigated over 1,000 people. And they found that autistic and ADHD individuals, so those who ADHDers, were significantly more likely to have higher scores in the monotropism questionnaire than the other cohorts that they in their study. And that's really, really significant, because it means that the theory of monotropism isn't just about autistic experiences. It goes beyond that into multiply neurodivergent people who may be autistic and ADHD as well. So it shifted a lot wider than that. And there's so many researchers now that are covering from many fields: education, psychologists, therapists, workplace settings, that are all looking into the theory of monotropism. And really some very significant and important studies which are looking into autistic burnout. So there's a study by Bertilsdotter Roskvitz, sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, in 2023, that explored how young autistic people manage their energy in work and relationships and leisure. And one of the key strategies that they found was through the lens of monotropism, where people were able to choose when and where to socialise and focus based on how much energy those shifts required. So it helped inform decision making and energy resource management when kind of you're thinking through the lens of monotropism and switching tasks. There's a really fantastic paper by Heisman that came out last year about the state of flow, which is when we're talking about monotropism, as I said, we're talking about those flow states, those flowy attention tunnels, and having time and space to navigate your life in flow as much as possible and manage the huge demands from sensory input and communication and all of the demands that happen in workplaces and classrooms and all those very neuronormative expectations to adapt and fit in to certain expected ways of being, which may not be in line with how many monotropic people naturally are, kind of goes against their flow in many ways. And yeah, when we're thinking about flow states, we're thinking about balancing all of those demands to hopefully get some glimmers of joy in our lives as well. So there's loads of studies that have covered everything from experiences of autistic play. There's a brilliant paper by Pritchard Rao in 2023 looking at autistic adults' experiences of play, and they highlighted how monotropic play was, when we're talking about play, we're not just talking about children's play for children. We're talking about the importance of, engaging in our own passions as well, and how valuable that is to support our well-being.
Helen,
I could talk about this all day, sorry. I could just go on and on.
This is all brilliant. I'm making so many notes because I'm learning so much, and I'm actually rewriting some training at the moment, and some of it is around monotropism. So I'm pinching some of your research articles here as you're speaking. But what I'm interested in, because I hear about the term flow a lot, and the beautifulness, I guess, of being in a flow state, how that can kind of make you feel very safe and regulated. I don't know if I've experienced a flow state before. I don't know. What does it feel like? What to you, Helen? Because obviously it's a very unique space. Can you describe how it feels to be in that flow state or not?
I guess I could give it a go. I mean, the flow theory initially was proposed by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and their flow theory quite a few years ago now, and they describe flow as a state where you're intrinsically motivated in something and you're also challenged in a way that feels kind of deeply rewarding and satisfying and fulfilling. For me, when I'm in a flow state, everything else seems to just melt away. That's the only way I can describe it, really. So like literally the rest of the world and the whole of my life just seems to literally disappear. And I may not notice anything else, like literally. So like if people are calling my name, if I have to set alarms for everything to keep me on track with stuff, but I may not even notice or hear those kind of alarms going off. I may not notice whether I'm hungry or thirsty. And as I said, I can be working or reading for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I think I've only been doing it for like 15, 20 minutes. And then it's kind of, I look outside and it's gone dark.
No, that does. I can resonate with that. That does happen to me. Yes, I get that. And then you forgot that you should have had a drink or you should have popped the loo or...
Yeah. And being afloat, for me, it's a constant... I think for me personally, it's highly related to kind of chronic long-term burnout. And when I'm engaged in that flow state with something that I find deeply rewarding or satisfying, it helps recharge me, and it kind of helps balance my sensory system out, and I feel better after engaging in things like that, and stimming, for example. Lots of autistic people talk about flow states and stimming as well as a form of regulation. It's been in that attention tunnel of there's fully immersive states where your whole mind and body and sensory system is just engaged, as much as possible. Like all your attentional resources are just in that flow. Like when I describe the garden hose, for example, it's very immersive as opposed to just being kind of spread dispersed lightly across lots of different other tasks and events.
Just because when I hear autistic people, autistic people in my life, both personally and professionally, talk about this flow state, it sounds actually like a wonderful place to be. And I'm always a little bit like, oh, why can't I get in this? Because I am the sprinkler, like Helen. I am the do-do-do-do, like attention everywhere constantly, like little tiny bits of attention.
Yeah, I think, especially for ADHD people, lots of people describe, I'm ADHD as well, about that kind of scattered attention. And so, like, even when I'm in a flow state, I have multiple things going on. It's like not just like I'm in a single task. My mind is constantly kind of connecting, like constellationally. So, like, I'm going from research paper to research paper, making loads of links all over the place, for example, or for children, for example, they might be fully engaged in their sensory play, but then they're expanding and creating links of other ways of playing and sensory experiences at the same time. It's not just I think people think it's a very tunnel vision, single track, but for me, it goes, when you go deep, you go wide as well, and things connect kind of multidimensionally also.
That whole thing resonated with me of going kind of focused in, because I'm studying at the minute, I'm doing my doctorate, so I can like study, but I can get focused, but then I do have all the little sprinklers. So exactly how you said, the post-it note writing down about this reference, and then and it's, yeah, okay, right. That helps clarify it for me, and hopefully our listeners, Helen. I think what we'll do is we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back because we've got a few more questions for you. And I've probably got a lot more questions that's on this script, but we've not got time to do all of those today, so we'll probably get you back. So we'll take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come back and keep chatting with Helen. Hi, while we're on a quick break, I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about the Family Development Service here at the North East Autism Society. The Family Development Services provides support for families pre, during and after diagnosis, and includes a variety of services including our parent and toddler groups, autism hubs, workshops for families, a dedicated enquiry line, and our resource site as well, which can be found at the family resource site on the North East Autism Society website. So if you go to www.ne-as.org.uk and go along to the family development site, you can find all the information there. Welcome back to This is Autism, our podcast from the North East Autism Society, and we are here today with the lovely Helen Edgars talking about monotropism. So we had some great conversations before the break, Helen. I guess one thing I'm really interested in is, what are the benefits of being able to embrace a monotropic mindset?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, because if we're not embracing of monotropism and we're still seeing autism through that kind of deficit lens and seeing ourselves and identifying ourselves through a deficit lens, it can really affect your well-being. And when we're talking about monotropism, we're talking about embracing flow as well. So going with our internal flow as opposed to fighting against it. And the things that generally fight against authentic, autistic and monotropic ways of being is because we're basically in a society that values neuronormativity and polytropism. So it leads many people to mask throughout their lives. And masking has got huge implications for mental health. It can lead to severe burnout and mental health crisis as well. So when we're talking about embracing monotropism, we're talking about being neurodiversity-affirming. We're talking about embracing our authentic autistic ADHD ways of being and processing and living in line with our needs and our attentional styles.
Helen, is it easy to do that, do you think, in a world that is designed for polytropic thinkers?
I think we need huge systemic change, which we're not going to be able to solve in this podcast. But I think that, as I said, there's a lot of research that is being done. There's a lot of amazing organisations. I work with Thrive and Autistic, who are doing loads of great work for autistic adults in healthcare and workplace settings. There's things. Rebecca Woods has done some great work around education and embracing monotropism as well, and the aneuploid organisation are helping to kind of reframe a lot of the teacher training around that as well. So there's loads of really good work being done, but it's all going to take time. But I think there is a shift happening, and when we're embracing of monotropism, when we're shifting and flipping that narrative, we can see that monotropic people of, those things, as I said, like the obsessive, what have previously been seen as obsessive or restricted interests, are actually people that are fully engaged and motivated in their own way. And it's just about reframing the support needs that those people need to help them thrive, really. We're talking about being able to engage in flow, what helps the sensory system regulate, what we can do to help predictability throughout the day, so there's less unexpected events where people are being pulled out of their attention tunnels, and transitions are a little bit smoother. Having more flexibility in schools and workplaces would be hugely helpful. Collaborating with autistic young people in school settings, so they have their voices are heard, so they've got that kind of agency and autonomy over how their days look and are shaped, and just living in line with a positive, authentic autistic identity framed through the lens of monotropism would go a really, really, really long way to supporting people.
Yeah, so I don't think often that validation of how difficult it is to be pulled out of that place, how dysregulating it can be. And I've got one young person in particular who describes it as being in a nice warm bath, and he's kind of in his zone. He's in his monotropic space, place, mindset.
Yeah, when you're so deeply immersed and your attentional resources are all pulled into that tunnel, so it makes everything, it can make filtering other things out really, 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 really difficult. So if you've got young people in a classroom with so much going on, loads of, you've got noise, you've got children, you've got lights, you've got teacher demand, you've got your actual lesson content, you've got juggling all of those multiple tasks to join in group activities and things like that. And it's just thinking about ways that could help autistic people a little bit more. So generally, a lot of people find it helpful not to have so many things going on all at one time, to help them focus a little bit more. Group interactions can be especially difficult because it involves that attention splitting into multiple streams, which can make group activities a lot more challenging to get through. So it's just thinking of little things that can help throughout the day to help manage energy load. Really, we're talking about energy accounting.
The boy I was talking about, he describes it as he's in a nice warm bath, and then someone comes along and tips ice cubes over his head in the bath. That's how he describes that kind of being in his zone at school. Deeply immersed in something. Somebody comes along and says, "Right, come on, we're moving on to this now." And it's almost like icy cold water getting thrown over his head.
Yeah, it can be really, really, really painful. And it helps explain a lot of those kind of meltdowns and shutdowns that lots of people are very familiar with, either as autistic people themselves or parents are familiar with their children, when they're suddenly expected to, I don't know, come and sit at the dinner table or whatever it happens to be, or suddenly get in the car like straight away. So having kind of cushioning around events can be really helpful, and not trying to squeeze too much into the day. Generally, autistic and monotropic people would generally need more time and space around things to ease those transitions as much as possible, with time to regulate the sensory systems effectively.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah, it helps just kind of shine a bit of a light on the kind of after school meltdowns that so many people talk about. I've experienced myself as well, with so many children. When you've been expected to fit in to society's kind of norms as well, and you're masking all day, which is completely energy draining. And then we're talking about how energy draining it is to meet all those external expectations and switch tasks and constantly realign your sensory system in different environments to different people's expectations, in different lessons, for example, for young people at school, and switching from subject to subject every 40 minutes or so. It's just exhausting. I mean, it's no wonder that so many young people are struggling in school and coming home and just completely melting down. And eventually you you hit burnout and you can't carry on like that forever. There's a limit to how long you can carry on like that for.
And unfortunately, that is what we're seeing more of in practice. So, this is a very, very real thing that we're talking about, saying very, very important. I've read about the Monotropic questionnaire on your website, Helen. Could you tell us a little bit more about it? And is that a useful tool? So if a parent was listening to this now, or an autistic adult, is that a tool that they could use to explore themselves a little bit more, thinking about monotropism?
So, the self-scoring version of the Monotropism questionnaire was made by David Kerry. And the link to that is on monotropism.org and also on my own website there. So there's a link to that. So the Monotropism questionnaire has been transformational for many autistic ADHD people, as I said. There isn't an actual specific questionnaire for young people or children yet. Hopefully that it's very much needed. So I'm hoping somebody will be working on that quite soon. But I think a lot of the questions, they're quite general, and I think for young adults, it may be very valuable to have a little look at it. And the Monotropism, it was created by a team of autistic-led researchers, much like the original theory of monotropism. It's an autistic-led theory, and the questionnaire is also autistic-led as well. And it covered many different areas, such as the difficulty of task switching, which we've talked about, deep engagement of special interests, the need for predictability and routines, how when you're focused on interests, it can often help reduce anxiety and stress and overwhelm, and how through the lens of monotropism, when you're engaged in those flow states, you can also kind of lose track of other things going on in your life, other responsibilities and other kind of input that's happening. And they identified 8 core factors that commonly show up in monotropic people. And these included struggles in social situations, where that high social demand and pull of attention, it pulls us away from our natural focus. Sometimes as talked about, that kind of splitting of attentional resources. Tanya Adkin, who I also work with, developed the concept of monotropic split, which is quite interesting to look at. That's on David Gray Hammond's website, Emergent Divergent, if you're interested in that. But when we're talking about monotropic split and struggles kind of regulating, we're talking about how monotropic attention is drawn into one or fewer channels at any one time, but because of the demands of living how we live in the society that we live in, and social situations often involve, in classrooms and workplaces, involve that splitting of attention into many different streams to take into account, trying to interpret people's tone of voice and body language, and thinking about how our own body and communication is perceived as well. So it helps explain lots of things like that, and demands and energy levels and how that can lead to burnout if you're constantly having to split your attention. So going back to sorry, I've been off on a bit of a tangent. So going back to the 8 core factors that commonly show up in monotropic people, there's the struggles in social situations, which I've just talked about. Rumination and anxiety can be quite common because it's that intense internal focus which often can loop around in people's minds. If you're hooked into something negative, maybe thinking of, I don't know, a comment somebody made to you in the office yesterday, and you're just lying there at night going over and over and over, and you can't hook out of that. Or it could be many other kind of things, but it's that wherever your attention is hooked, it's hooked. And so you're in that deep flow state, whether it's a kind of positive joy of, looking at your shiny lights through the window, or whether it's something less helpful. The third factor that they identified was difficulties with decision making, which, especially for those decisions which are outside of our interest and current attention tunnel. So that can obviously impact children and adults in multiple ways, because life's not just about things that we're interested in. We've got to go to work, we've got to like manage our bank accounts, we've got to go shopping, we've got to do the washing up and the hoovering and pack our bags to go to school or work or whatever. And all of those things can be of all decisions that we have to make, and it's that splitting of attention onto other tasks, which can be very difficult and leave people in that kind of state of inertia that I talked about, where you're stuck or almost unable to start or stop other things. The fourth, I'm going to go down all 8 factors here, sorry. So the fourth one was the calming effects of those monotropic interests that people can have, that I've mentioned, can often serve as kind of sensory and emotional regulators, really. It's a way of grounding yourself and replenishing your energy. The fifth point they made was the need for routines to support consistency, and it helps reduce kind of cognitive demands. And when we're talking about routines here, not timetables, I think that's quite important for me to mention, because there's a lot of misconceptions that autistic children need kind of those really structured timetables, and where there's somewhere from like 9 till 9:30, and then a timer goes off or whatever, and they've then got to move on to somewhere else, and that can be not very helpful, because it's that pulling out of flow states. So when we're talking about routines, we're talking about the routines of the day, and having flexible routines, that are adaptable as much as possible. The sixth point was the benefits of kind of focused engagement, which we've talked about in those flow states. And the seventh element was the losing track of time and context, which can really impact people. And their eighth point was the environmental impact on attention, which I've mentioned, where the kind of sensory system, your monotropic kind of attention tunnels can almost kind of I describe it as kind of like a flooding for me personally, that kind of overload of just input and information, where you're even unable to keep splitting your attention. And that can be, really difficult to manage, really. It can lead to meltdowns, shutdowns, and over a long term, it can lead to burnout then.
They were wonderfully summarised. Thank you, Helen. I've got loads of notes here. Lots of, probably a lot more questions as well. So one of the things I think many people think, and I want your view on whether or not this is correct. Many people think that autistic people are monotropic thinkers and people who have ADHD are polytropic thinkers. Is that accurate?
No, that's a misconception. So I thought I had mentioned that, but I haven't mentioned it, have I? So no, that is a misconception. And as the Monotropism questionnaire has shown, that the people that scored the highest out of any cohort in the Monotropism questionnaire were ADHDers, those that were autistic and ADHD. So the theory of monotropism is helping to kind of explain the lived experience for autistic and ADHD people. Polytropism, where your attention is more smoothly and evenly distributed, shall we say, generally describes the way people think that who are not autistic and not ADHD, so neurotypical people, is how I would probably summarise that.
That's very helpful, because I've heard that many times, actually.
I think there's a misconception that if you're ADHD, then you've got loads of things going on, so you're constantly, you've got multiple channels open, going kind of deeper, and all of your attentional resources being pulled towards fewer things at any one time, and how that impacts, your sensory system, your communication, the way you socialise, the way you manage and plan your day.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So my final question, how can we adapt environments? And you have touched on this, Helen, throughout, I guess, and thinking about some strategies, but how can we change, not the world, that might be a bit big for today in this podcast, but what can we do to better support people who think in a monotropic way?
Yeah, I think it's generally it's about being neuroaffirming, isn't it? And not just being neurodiversity kind of light, and kind of doing the tick box things of being neurodiversity affirming. It's about really thinking about and shifting the way we design our kind of spaces, our expectations of people and the way we interact with each other. It's not about fixing people. It's moving away from those behaviourist kind of models and approaches, especially in education, where autistic people are certainly, even going back to my own teacher training, I was trained through a behaviourist model. I did all of the kind of PECs, communication, support strategies, social stories, encouraging children to kind of sit appropriately, talk appropriate, in the right way, and turn taking in the right expected way, all framed through a very neurotypical lens of how people think children should be, which kind of goes against their authentic identity, and it can cause a lot of harm. And I think more people are recognising the harm of behaviourism now, and by embracing the theory of monotropism, it helps us think of ways we can change the environment as opposed to changing the theory, people. I really like Luke Bearden's a lecturer at Sheffield University, and his kind of golden equation is autism plus environment equals outcomes. So when we're talking about autistic people, monotropic people, ADHD people, we're talking about ways that we need to change the environment to improve their outcomes and to improve their well-being, and not change them as people. So there's a few things that I think could help. Being aware of kind of the sensory environment. Depending, there's no kind of fixed list here, because it's going to obviously depend on the person, so it needs to be very flexible and adaptable. But certainly for me, when I'm thinking about an environment that would help myself, I don't want anything too loud or too bright. I kind of like dim areas, like kind of lots of soft lighting, not too much other sound going on around me. Things like wearing ear defenders can be really helpful. So in classrooms, it's having those quiet areas, and in offices that people can go to, having sensory tools that are accessible for everybody, so people aren't just singled out because of their sensory needs. So everybody's got the same access to things. Having kind of protected time in your day for that deep focus and time for your interests and passions is really important. Autistic people's passions and interests are far more than hobbies. I think people sometimes think, they're just like really obsessed with something, or that's their hobby that they're just really fixated with. And that kind of needs reframing. Autistic passions and interests are more than hobbies to a lot of autistic people. It's really what sustains you. It's what brings you joy, what supports your well-being. And as I've explained, when you're engaged in that flow state with the things that interest you, your passions, it can restore your energy. It can help prevent burnout. So for children that are really struggling, for example, in school, more time with their passions and interests could really, really help them kind of replenish their energy really, and support flow states.
Wonderful. Helen, that was, honestly, it's been so insightful chatting to you, and I could have chatted to you for a lot longer, but we have run out of time.
It's just my own interest. I knew this would be a huge info dump for me, which is why I tried to make some notes, but thank you very much.
No, honestly, it's been lovely. Where can people find out more about you, Helen? Do you want to direct people to your website or anything?
So my own website is autistic-realms.com, www.autistic-realms.com. I'm on most social media most days. I'm on Facebook, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, Instagram. As I said, I also work closely with Fergus Murray on monotropism.org, which is the main website for all things autism related, and it also houses the archives of Dinah Murray, who was one of the original researchers and person who conceptualized monotropism with Wen Lawson back in the 90s. So have a look on monotropism.org as well.
That's great. And we will pop your website and stuff in the notes when this goes out. So I guess to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've got any questions or comments about anything that you've heard today, then please get in touch with us at info@ne-as.org.uk. You can also follow the North East Autism Society on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn. The podcast This Is Autism comes out every month, and you can subscribe on Apple Apple Podcasts, Google, or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.